FarmED is the centre for farm and food education based here in the Cotswolds. Our mission is to promote regenerative agriculture and sustainable food systems through knowledge exchange, education, events, research and personal development. Our audience is broad. It is you, it is everyone, from children to families to farmers, local communities, chefs, policymakers, agronomists, influencers. We want to see you all here at FarmED. So, hope you enjoy the podcast. Find us on social media, take a look at our website and come and join us soon at FarmED. Welcome to FarmED podcast number 9. I'm Jonty, the manager here at FarmED. In today's episode we'll be exploring the wonderful world of food tourism, something very close to my heart. We'll be looking at what is food tourism, what role does it play in the rural economy and what challenges does the sector face. But most importantly, what are the big opportunities out there now for farmers, growers, foodies, rural entrepreneurs, etc. I'm joined by two wonderful experts who share the FarmED vision, who are passionate about regeneration, rural communities, great food, doing things differently and doing things entrepreneurially. We have Claire Thayers, Happerley Ambassador and Consultant in CSR, and Dr. Richard Baines, Senior Lecturer at the RAU and Consultant. Welcome both.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, it's very exciting.
It was a very brief introduction to yourselves. Why don't you explain your stories? Tell us your passion and your involvement in food. Claire.
Over to you, Claire.
Oh, thank you. First and foremost, I'm a foodie. Background, young farmers, family farmed, so it's very much part of my DNA. And basically work within a packaging design agency, working with every major brand. So that was quite an interesting learning curve for 20 years. Went to Cornwall in 1999. My light bulb moment when I was in Cornwall was talking about communities and actually the local economy and the importance of the visitor economy. So whilst I was in Cornwall, I was very lucky to have worked with Malcolm Bell, Chief Exec of Visit Cornwall. Also Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, and it became very apparent to me that the visitor economy was actually fueling the whole of Cornwall, because although you think visitor economy is just about hotels and what have you, no it's not. It actually trickle down effect is so important. So whilst working in Cornwall, I was part of the South West Regional Growth Fund, which was a £5 million pot of money to promote the South West as a region. So fortunately for me, I got to attend quite a few of the travel shows in Europe, and that was certainly a steep learning curve, and I definitely learned a lot whilst I was there. And interestingly, food and drink is a big driver to our rural counties in the southwest. Yeah. So I absolutely get the joined up approach in terms of agriculture, which again is so important because it's the beautiful countryside and our farmers are managing that wonderful countryside. So how can we do more of that? How can we promote the Southwest, Gloucestershire, right the way down to the individual towns that we've got in the county too? So yes, it's something that's really close to my heart. And now working with Happerley, which is all about provenance and the importance of being able to tell the story. Okay. Not to say what's right or wrong to eat, but actually enable people to make an informed decision. So yeah, it's really all very exciting.
Brilliant. We'll come back to Happerley in a minute.
Thank you.
Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Jonty. I'm Richard Baines, and I'm a farmer's son from Staffordshire, small farm, big family. I'm one of 7 children, and therefore my opportunity to go back on to do farming, which was my first love, wasn't there. That gave me the thought about looking at how I can help agriculture in its widest sense going forward, which took me to look at sort of agricultural education with an interest in going into research. My PhD was in looking at plant competition between legumes and grasses at a time when everyone was just throwing bag fertiliser at everything.
And you were Ian Wilkinson's founder of FarmED's lecture, is that right?
Yes.
Did you claim that fame?
He actually said I taught him everything that he knows about grassland.
There we go, full circle.
I don't think so. I think I learnt as much from my students, and I still learn as much from my students as they learn from me. And I think that's a good way of looking at it. I currently am a senior academic at the Royal Agricultural University, and my sort of claims to fame there, I think, would be that I was one of the people that set up 21 years ago the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Security Masters Programmes, which is still going strong. Some 27 students on it this year, and they're coming from all around the world, but about 50% are coming from Africa and Indian subcontinent, and therefore it's very much about emerging agriculture and food systems. And in those areas, tourism is probably a bigger earner than agriculture, and therefore being able to help them take opportunities from people's interest in the countryside is important. I also was guilty of establishing the food centre and the kitchen, and I'm great to see one here and taking on that mantle, and I'm interested to see how that's going to develop in terms of helping people create new experiences from food. And in addition, I sort of founded and managed for 9 years an African fellowship programme which was funded from industry and allowed African students to come and learn about agriculture and entrepreneurship, and then to be the leaders in their own country going back. And I'm really proud how that has developed and what some of my fellows have gone on to do. I was also guilty of working within that, of actually having an elective in agri-food tourism many years ago, which then became one of the core modules of the programme you developed, Jonty.
Yes, guilty.
Which was a fantastic rural tourism programme, which I think had got great potential, but I don't think it ever had the legs to run or the support to allow it to go fully, which is unfortunate. And therefore it's quite good to see that we're coming back to that. In addition to that, from my work at the university, I'm also an independent consultant, and I'm a member of Cotswold Taste, which is a local business-to-business cooperative. And for part of my work, I'm actually working on local food models, linking urban consumers with rural consumers, and that's been work that I've been doing here in the UK. A project I think we can talk about a little bit later, which is about the local agri-food tourism initiative we're starting. But also working on with urban communities and rural communities in China to try and help them find a more holistic, resilient and sustainable way of looking at their food. And I actually like the Chinese philosophy around this. We talk about sustainability from an environmental, social and economic dimension. They have a much simpler philosophy. There's one world and we're part of it.
Okay,
and we've got to live in harmony with it.
Yeah.
So,
brilliant. I mean, the wealth of experience in this room blows me away, and we're going to try and keep it to half an hour.
But you've also got experience in this as well, John.
Yeah,
Don't forget.
Don't go shy.
I hear my voice plenty. I need to hear your voices. Go back to first principles. How would you define food tourism, Claire?
As I said, I was very fortunate to attend quite a lot of the events in Europe and listen to a lot of speakers. There's a huge surge now with technology that we've got. In the old days, in quotes, and I can say that because I am old, if you were in an area, you would actually pay to get a journalist to fly in, you put them on a bus, you'd bus them round, you'd see the usual sort of attractions. Now, because of technology, it's much more about independent travel. People are using their iPads to plan their own activities, and certainly food and drink is experiences. So when you hear some of these eminent people talking, it's absolutely about living as the locals live. So when you listen to some of the leaders in Milan and Barcelona, they're actually saying that they have a flat in those cities. They recruit local people as volunteers to actually work with some of the bloggers, not the blaggers, I hasten, depending on how they want to position their destination. And they immerse themselves in that local experience. And I think we're so lucky to live in the rural communities that we live in, because when people come, they might think England is what they've seen on TV in terms of London. But when they can come here and can immerse themselves and go on farm walks and see the beautiful countryside and see the livestock, which obviously lots of countries don't have access to, that whole immersive feel. And of course, the one great thing is you can't taste or enjoy beautiful food and drink from looking at it on the internet. So I think that whole experience is really important to get people here.
So it's about experiential. How authentic is it? Is it staged? That's something that bothers me. How real is it?
Yeah, I think we have to be real. We have to be authentic, because again, certainly with my CSR hat on, this is about risk management as well. If you are saying that you're authentic and real, then you better really step up to the mark, deliver what you're saying you'll deliver. Because you can spend all the money you want promoting your beautiful farm B&B or your, and as we know, many farmers have had to diversify to create extra income. You have to deliver what you're saying you're going to deliver, because it's no point marketing yourselves and then not be authentic. So that's a really key message, I think, to get out to people. Be true and be honest and transparent, and be honest and transparent. It's really important.
The link, Richard, where's the link between food tourism and agri-tourism? Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think first of all I'd like to just add a little bit to what Claire was saying about what is sort of food tourism. I think when anyone goes to visit a location or go to have recreation or to recharge their batteries or to spend a period of time living in an area, they're going there because they want to experience the heritage of that site, that area.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's the built heritage, such as going and seeing great buildings and these types of things. It's the artistic and cultural heritage of that area. It's the natural heritage of the landscape, but it's also the food heritage.
Yeah.
And that food heritage comes from the agriculture that produces there that's limited by the definition of the landscape. And therefore, when you actually eat food that's local to an area, you're actually eating the landscape.
Yeah.
Yes,
in
that's
reality.
true. Yeah,
And I think these are the some of the
Lovely.
good for your bloggers there. Try
Yes,
that one.
very good. Yeah, no, we'll get that one out there.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. And I guess what we need to be doing is that those who are actually using local food, well, first of all, we need to try and get tourism operators to promote local food more than perhaps what they sometimes do. And again, that comes down to the authenticity and reality of what you're asking the question on, Jonty. But those local tourism operators also need to know where they can source that food from the producers. And therefore, we need a connection between local producers and purveyors and local tourist operators.
Yeah.
And then we need to be able to tell the story
Yeah.
behind it.
Yeah.
And if you tell the story, you're going to hook people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, Claire, the thing you said about, you can go on the website and you can experience it, but you can't taste it.
Exactly.
One of the projects we're working on is that maybe we could just, if someone wants to look at a virtual walk around the Cotswolds, in advance of looking at it on the website, what if they could actually order a little grazing taster to be delivered by Amazon, and they can actually look at the video and taste the food and then say, actually, I like that, I want to go back and have some more of it.
Yeah.
So I think we can bridge those gaps. But that's how I see it.
Yeah.
It's making a link between the producers and the processors and the tourism operators at a local level,
Yeah.
and to give each of them confidence that they can deliver the needs of each other.
Okay. And then agriculture, the primary producers,
Yeah.
they fit in there, not selling the sizzle, but getting people out into nature, telling the original stories of primary products.
Exactly.
Getting people into fresh air. And then the food is the capstone, I see, for me,
Yeah.
of bringing that together.
Yeah.
You talk about joining the dots, and I see it bigger than that. It is the capstone.
I think
Yeah.
you've got to not only join the dots of what's there already, you've got to extend them.
Yeah.
You've got to be able
Yeah.
to say that when someone's walking a footpath, that actually this farm is doing local food, and
Yeah.
you can book a cream tea there, or you can book a visit there to do something,
Yeah.
and at least people are tooled up and have been prepared, ready to do it.
Yeah.
And of course, they've also addressed all the health and safety issues they would need to do for having visitors on the farm. They have to do it from a third-party risk assessment already, but they just need to be guided as to what they need to have in place to make it a safe and a meaningful experience.
So it sounds wonderful. What are the challenges and the barriers? Because I know lots of farmers, growers, local foodies that want to do more in this sector. Why are we not great at it? We are in some regions, but not others. What's the
Can I
barriers?
just kick off on that one first of all? I think one of the problems we've got is that a vast majority of farmers are actually locked into a national global food market model. And therefore they look at diversification as being something that's a minor add-on, whereas perhaps they've got to take that leap of faith into making it a core part of their business first of all.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And then secondly, it's about guiding them to know what their customers need in the local area, and having that as maybe one avenue for their food sales and their experiences, and then linking them to be able to sort of diversify in terms of their outlets for food, of which local food models and linking to local food tourism would be one of those, if you've got an area that's rife for tourism. And if we can't make this work in the Cotswolds, we can't make it work anywhere in the world.
Gloucestershire.
To be honest.
We'll come on to Cotswold, Gloucestershire, Cornwall models.
Yes,
Claire,
definitely.
what do you think the barriers and the challenges are for people that want to do more food tourism?
Well, I think, and I can say this coming from a farming background, I think one of the challenges we've got within the farming sector is that people are farming as they've always farmed. There is this need to have a fresh approach. This is why I'm so excited about what we're doing here, Jonty, because we've got to allow the younger generation to now take the reins and go forward and look at things differently and brighter, with address some new opportunities. And as we're going to say later on, there are some amazing, exciting opportunities out there, but it's allowing that generational handover in a lot of us. I think that is a big challenge. People will always do what they've always done. So I think that's a big opportunity. And also, dare I say, we still are very disjointed. We need to have that cross-sector working and have the opportunity to have these conversations, which again is why FarmED is amazing, because you can use this fantastic facility to actually have some thought leaders talking about this and moving it forward. Because if we don't address this and we don't have a better connection, so one of the things we're doing at Happerley at the moment is Happerley Kitchen Gardens, and that's actually helping farmers to create a sustainable income by taking 2 or 3 acres and working with a collaborative of local chefs right on the doorstep and grow a whole year's programme of seasonal produce for those chefs to use. So we're cutting out the middleman, it's minimising the food miles, and you're able to tell that story. And again, it's all coming back to clever marketing, and that's what we as consumers want to know. We want to know the story of where our food comes from. So if we can enable those chefs to tell that story, then again, it's all back to that immersive food tourism, people wanting to know more about it. So I think there's huge opportunities.
I'm going to come to opportunities, the barriers. I want to know the
barriers. The barriers, I think, is about that. I do think that we need to allow the younger generation to take the...
Is that the mindset?
I think it is mindset, yeah.
Entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, we need to do, and I know the RAU do lots on the entrepreneurial side of things, and also talking about social entrepreneurs and doing business in a different way, which I think is, it's again a mindset. We've got to open people's minds.
I think there's another area that I think is important, is if we actually look at agricultural policy from government and from regions, it is very much orientated to a very narrow agenda, one which is giving payments for environmental responsibility, and but then allowing the market itself to find its own way. So it's the decoupling of that. I think one of the things that is a great challenge around the world is the way in which very few countries have got agricultural policy that focuses on local and urban agriculture. And I think that's an area that when people start to get their hands in the ground and they want to go and experience more of it. So I think there's some key policy areas that need to be looked at. And I think picking up on what Claire said around the entrepreneurship, I do think we're looking for people who are social entrepreneurs that are not necessarily looking for a profit, are actually looking for a different type of reward, which is a sense of fulfillment, a sense of belonging, sense of community, which I don't think we actually value in the economic markets at the moment.
Totally agree.
Okay, so I've got mindset. I realise there are some technical barriers too. We can't all just go and set up a food business tomorrow. I'm a simple farmer. What am I going to do? So how can we get with those technical barriers? What support's out there?
I think one of the ways in which you can overcome that is to identify those which are most suited to be front of house facing the tourist. And then it's about creating networks around those where a particular farmer might just be, okay, all I'm doing here is providing the local green cheese for it, but that's just part of my diversification and I haven't got to worry about everything else. It's being looked after. So it's about creating networks that are prepared to work together.
Because we can't do everything. And I think you said it.
Yeah, you can't.
The more you try and
someone can produce it, someone can process it, someone needs to market it, someone then needs to...
do the finance and admin.
But someone needs to tell the whole story so that the tourism operator and the consumer of tourism actually does get the full story if they want it.
Okay. Just thinking back a little bit, we're talking food, but it's also beer, gin, wine. Massive, isn't it?
Huge. I think as well, just go back just one step. I think another barrier, dare I say, is a lot of our destination management organisations, and having worked on the Southwest region, having 11 destinations to work with, most of those are funded by the public purse. Now, that future is looking rocky. So the DMOs being able to support the farmers, the agri-food, is going to be more challenging. And I think, well, I'm working with Visit Gloucestershire, which is bubbling away in the background at the moment, but it's all very well putting a vision together for what Gloucestershire is going to look like in 2050, but we have to manage the brand now. And food and drink is a massive part of that brand, and I think of it as packaging up, going back to my background in food packaging. But we need to package up Gloucestershire as a brand and what we're delivering under the Gloucester brand, how that sits alongside Cotswolds. And of course, a lot of these boundaries have been put in place. Well, that's only held back because of the public purse and because it's councils, 5 different councils putting money into Cotswolds. So if we can start taking ownership and look after brand Gloucestershire and manage that, as well as looking at the Southwest as a region and then the UK as a whole. But food and drink has to be absolutely crucial to that, because that gives us the nuances. You know, Cumbria food is different very much to Gloucestershire food. So aren't we lucky to have Gloucester Old Spots and Gloucester cheese and all these wonderful things?
It sounds then when you're talking it sounds a little bit top down though, is it? You know, LEPs and county councils and DMOs.
Absolutely.
Surely it needs to be bottom up.
It does need to be bottom up. And again, we've got a challenge, and I'm looking to Richard because I'm sure you feel this. We have the growth hubs, for example. We've had a big growth hub in the middle of Gloucester. They're now rolling out 36 of them across the county. But if you talk to anybody within hospitality or within farming, they wouldn't even know about growth hubs.
No.
So
can I pick up on that, Claire? Because I think that's an important area. We came up with a crazy idea within Cotswold Taste, or I sort of proposed it to Cotswold Taste to sort of act as the host of this, about creating some new agri-food tourism trails to look at a range of people and to maybe run 2 or 3 pilots to start with. And then in the second phase, start to then put that onto a platform so it can actually be more orientated to visitors in a wider sense. And we went through all of what you were just talking about, Claire, to try and get funding for this. And it's been an absolute nightmare because everyone wants to do their own little thing, their own little agendas. And it's very narrow thinking in many cases, which is a problem. However, one of the steering group that we invited was CCRI, and they are actually part of a wider project with Newcastle, Warwick, CCRI and RAU to look at rebuilding the rural economy. Brilliant. And they were looking for projects, and I shared with them the project idea we've got, and they've actually got behind it, and we're now just doing the final costing and we'll be starting them. And what we're trying to do, Cotswold Taste is acting as a lead, and there's a small team that's working on it, but we're now working with CCRI team as well. And our model is to look at the existing tourism in a particular location, then map the total heritage of that area, you know, the art heritage, the natural, the built and the food heritage, look at what they are delivering, look at what's available in terms of local food sourcing, and then go into a participatory workshop with those tourism operators to try and work out an idea about creating a holistic and integrated, like we're talking about, a network. And then we are going to go away and actually try and refine that and then take it back to them and say, and then hand it over to them. Our first trail we're going to look at doing is the Stroud and Stonehouse Canal project around there. And that's great because they've just got major funding to actually link that back to the waterways network. So brilliant timing.
Wonderful.
Our second project we hope to do and get funding for will actually be part of the Cotswold Way. And then our third one will be on the Forest of Dean. And if those work, we want to really create a framework about how these projects can actually help both the farmers in terms of their links and the tourism operators, and create an enhanced tourism experience for local people and visitors. And on the back of that, create a local food hub that's virtually available to anyone to be able to source that food subsequently. And if we can do that on those 3 areas, it would create a model that could be taken to Worcestershire, could be taken anywhere, and it can be taken down and into the sort of into Italy and say, let's do it there with the agritourism that's going on there, for example.
I think the Italians will teach us 1 or 2 things.
Well, I think they can teach us a lot in terms of their agritourism or what they're doing. But I don't know whether they've actually developed this hub to create a virtual platform for selling food afterwards.
Got you.
And I think that's the bit. And we're learning from them, we're looking at them in detail, and I'd love to be able to bring those in. And maybe we can, because the 2 workshops we're doing will be virtual workshops. And you're very welcome to join that workshop when we get onto it, if you want. From a FarmED
that'd be fun.
I
mean, just from a FarmED point of view, we're hoping to run some entrepreneurship workshops here, and boot camps and sessions on food tourism. And try and bring all that together. Not only will we, hopefully we're also a destination as well with our new FarmED kitchen.
You can see why I was asking how public could get to you
earlier. So watch this space. I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Go on then.
What's your favourite food tourism experience that you enjoy or have done in your past?
Oh, for God's sake. Can I'm going to be a little bit outrageous with this one. I've had 2 experiences done food tourism, and one is a little bit rude, so I apologise.
We can always edit it out, Richard, don't worry.
My first one was when we were actually trying to do some development of integrated estates in Malaysia. It's an RAU project, and I was looking at the food and the tourism side of it and the environmental impact. And we went to see a village homestay on the Straits of Malacca. And after we'd had the meal, and it was with Professor Arneson that you may have remembered from previously, and they said, would you like to see our sort of mussel beds? Oh, that'd be great, can I have a look at that? We went on a dugout canoe, about 10 miles off the Straits of Malacca, and in the middle of nowhere, looking at these mussels, and we took them back and we actually prepared them and ate them, and it was brilliant.
Okay.
My second one was looking at the beef industry in China, and we ended up at an agri-processing factory in Jinnang, near to just up north of from Taiwan, in Shandong province. And they said, we process every part of it, and they brought various bits of meat out, and they said, we don't think you'll try this one, but have a go. And it was actually deep fried bull's penis.
Perfect.
Nice.
Yeah, my
And
favourite.
then another one they tried on me, they said, you won't eat this, and it was actually deep fried scorpions. And I said, do you have to break the sting off the back? There's my experience for you.
There's two good ones. Claire, beat
Oh,
that.
my goodness, I can't.
I'd
Don't
just
say
like to
jam
take
and
the risk.
scones at National Trust property
No,
now.
it's not the same now, is it? No, I've got a mussel story. I've got a
We all.
mussel story. So I was doing a talk in Milan on sustainable tourism and extolling the virtues of Cornish produce and pictures of crabs and Rick Stein and la la la. And the guy who was stood next to me was representing Sweden. So we had this lovely, interesting banter about which country had the best crabs. So out of that, fortunately, I was invited out to Gothenburg. And that was amazing because he took me out to what was a failing restaurant, but it was on the side of a field. And very entrepreneurial, he realised that actually the experience was what it was about. So we all got donned up with our waterproofs and our sou'westers, and off we went on a little fishing trawler, hauled up ropes of mussels, and then went back and outdoors cooked the mussels together. So it was, you'll never forget it. It was one of those experiences that will stay with me forever. If I'd just gone to that restaurant and had mussels served up in a bowl like anybody else, it wouldn't have been so memorable, but that was incredible. And that's when I realised, my God, there's so much more we could be doing.
Yeah.
Can I give you a bad experience about food
Please,
tourism?
yeah, absolutely. Excellent.
Oh,
Yeah, what's
Not
your
a bad
worst?
experience,
Yes,
a different one. I went to an IAMA conference in Florence many years ago, and as part of that, we were going to have a dinner at the palace over to the west of the city. And we were actually before that, we had the Junior Minister of Food and Tourism giving us a short talk. And we were actually in the sort of trading house of the Medici family with the statue of David outside and the Uffizi Gallery and Museum right next to us. And his short talk lasted an hour and a half on food tourism and food in Italy.
Yeah.
But then we had a quick look around the art gallery and museum for about half an hour, and then they allowed us to walk the private walkway of the Medici over the Ponte Vecchio, where no one goes.
Yeah.
And I was so much enjoying that. I was actually last to get to where they were having the food. It was all eaten by the time I got there. But one of the things from a cultural point of view, I actually loved. I was walking on this corridor and I saw this one picture, and it was actually a picture of Charlie Chaplin's daughter, drawn by Marc Chagall. And it's not on public display anywhere.
Yeah.
Now that is a cultural experience, and it didn't matter that I didn't get any food, because I eat too much food anyway. But that's what I mean about the experience you get when you live and do something in reality.
Yeah, the food draws you into different avenues, different areas you'll never see.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. Claire, have you got a bad one?
I haven't, no, not one that I'm going to share with you, Jonty, for sure.
That mussel that wasn't cooked.
Yeah, absolutely, that's a story for another day. But I also think it's quite interesting that when people come into our area and they sample our wonderful produce, what's interesting is when they go home, they want then to import it. So I think, again, it's joining those dots up that we can do so much more, and I think there's huge export opportunities.
Yeah.
And I know the Chinese are particularly passionate about provenance, for example, so we've had conversations where we're being approached saying, actually, provenance is really important to us, and happily we're enabling them, our local people, to tell that story, because they've had, eating bats didn't go down particularly well, so I think they're much more aware
they
of
weren't
knowing.
cooked enough.
Yeah, lightly fried.
But I think, Claire, that's why with the project that we're about to start, we're hoping we're going to kick it off in the next couple of weeks. Phase 2 of that is actually where we've actually got suppliers who are supplying to the local tourism operators and people who've enjoyed that food, that we will then be able to link those farmers to the Gloucestershire Food Hub that's developing, so people can order it via the Food Hub. Don't reinvent the wheel, just use what's there already. And actually then can get that Cotswold gin or wherever else they wanted, either directly from the supplier if they're tooled up for that, or through the platform. So I think this is creating the virtual local market, the virtual village store for Gloucestershire food purveyors through the Gloucestershire Food Hub, and that could extend wider to the Cotswolds and whatever as we go along. And I think that's the joined up bit. It's how can the tourist get an idea of what's on offer virtually and then come and experience it, and then how can they extend that experience through getting those foods that I mean, food is emotion, and therefore when you taste that, you're back there.
Yeah.
And how can they get that later? So when they go home and have a dinner party with their friends, they can say, we went to the Cotswolds, it was great. Here's some Cotswold cream and scones, or here's some of the gin that was there from Burford. And they think, this is brilliant.
Absolutely.
You
That's
know?
why 90%,
and then they say, we're going to go there.
That's why 90% of photographs on Instagram are food photographs.
Absolutely.
Yes, there it is.
And I think very quickly, but on the visitor economy side of things, and the fact that we can paddle our own canoe here, is that actually we should be talking to the self-catering businesses and actually encouraging them to have a link onto each of their booking forms, so that instead of somebody coming down from London and filling up their Land Rover full of food from Waitrose, actually there can be a vastly increased offering in terms of food waiting for them upon their arrival. We could even have a CSR angle to that, and sort of 10% for every sale for that produce goes back into the local community. So I think there's huge opportunities.
Definitely.
But it's having that platform to have those joined up discussions.
And when you get those joined up links,
it's so
networks,
exciting.
I think the multiplier effect on local food is ridiculous. 2.67 or something silly.
I think there's an important point about the multiplier effect that it's worth sharing at this stage. And that is that if we actually look at how our food system has been dominated by the supermarket format since the 50s and 60s, if we go back before that, and this was some stuff that was done by Friends of the Earth and CPRE, if we were buying our food from local retailers, the butcher, the baker, the fruitier and so forth, about 50% of what we spent on that food recirculated in the local economy and developed that rural economy further. Yeah. In our modern supermarket area now, most people buy most of their food from the big supermarkets. Less than 10% circulates in the local economy. Yeah. So if we can shorten the chains and make it more local, we should be able to make local food no more expensive than the supermarket, and those few people involved in the shorter chains can share more of that value. And that comes back to a corporate shared value model, beyond that of corporate social responsibility. And that's what drives me, and that was one of the major mantras behind the idea of this tourism development we're trying to work on at the moment.
Brilliant. I mean, that's why we're here at FarmED, bringing it back to sustainable food systems.
Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. There's two elephants in the room, and I'm not being rude.
Thanks for that, Jonty. I have put a bit of weight on since COVID. You're right.
Covid and Brexit. Does that open up new opportunities for food tourism, or is it going to hold us back?
I think that you're either a cup half full or a cup half empty. So that's your optimist and your pessimist, or you've got the opportunist, which is there's a cup there, I'm going to have a drink. And I think those who are entrepreneurial and opportunistic, I think the more we can rely on local food, the less we have to rely on cross-border trade, and therefore that will create a greater resilience than if we're actually relying on markets elsewhere. But then again, we can't actually eat all the Cotswold lamb in the Cotswolds, unfortunately. So I think there's that side of it from a Brexit point of view. I think the more we can actually rely on a local food model, the less we're relying on trade. And it's part of what, Jonty, I think you were involved when we actually put that proof of evidence into about a year ago, and my argument there was about supporting local food. COVID, I actually think that COVID has demonstrated how the local food model can be potentially more resilient. I was really pleased how our local market garden fruit and vegetable shop, how Jessie Smiths and that actually tooled up to be able to cope with ordering online and local delivery or local click and collect type models. And I think it did demonstrate it potentially could be more resilient to COVID, definitely. And create a localness. And of course, if you're doing it locally, then you actually got less regional movement. Yeah. So I think it's an opportunity if we get it right.
If we get it right. Well, as Richard and Jonty know, Happerley was born out of a conversation talking about Brexit. Two farmers literally over a pint of beer saying this isn't a level playing field. How can we empower our farmers to tell their story? If they can tell their story, then they can get that margin that they so desperately need. So that's where Happerley was born. So I think if we can do that, and as I said, it's about empowering a customer to make an informed decision. And I was saying to Jonty earlier that I did a bit of research on that and talking to a poultry producer who was absolutely saying we need this. Our local producers got beautifully fed, wonderful welfare for their geese for the Christmas table, and literally the bottom fell out of the market 2 weeks before. They did the research, and in Slovakia they have geese, they don't care what they feed them, they don't care about the welfare, they just want the feathering down, and they were bringing them in, plucking them alive, putting them back in the snow, and then the carcass was waste. So our markets was flooded with cheap goose meat. So how could our farmers possibly compete on a level playing field? They just couldn't. So if we can empower the farmers to tell their story, post-Brexit and have this more awareness about asking where your food comes from. I think that's a huge opportunity. And COVID, absolutely what you were saying, Richard, I think people are more aware. There's this health implication as well now. People are more aware of what they're eating and how it affects their health and immune system. But also the veg box schemes are so exciting to see how entrepreneurial and how quick some of these farmers were to readapt and reform their businesses. So I think the challenge, because not that we really want to dwell too much on the challenges, but it's how we keep that customer interest, because yes, they used it. The loyalty is so important, because once they get back to working full time, time poor, they haven't got the time to go to the farm shop, etc. So how can we make it easier for the consumer? So we're looking at...
So it's how to make it easier, good value, but still selling the sizzle and the experience at the same time.
I'll tell you who's got a really good model for this is Guy at Riverhead Organics, the way in which they've grown. And now they're a community interest company in terms of their employees own 75% of it.
Great.
And I think, from supplying vegetables to 30 friends to sort of several £1 million turnover, and to actually have a local but regional marketing model is very clever. And I think we can learn a lot from those sorts of models. I want to just share one other thing with you about, you mentioned, Claire, about people coming up from London and stocking up at Waitrose. One of the things that fascinated me is that we've actually got GWR quite interested in the Stroud story we're doing, because they know that some of their passengers actually get on a train on a Saturday morning, come up to Stroud, go to the farmers market, and Stroud Farmers Market is like a carnival every time you go there. It's brilliant. And then they load up with their food, get back on the train and go back again. And I think GWR would say, well, why don't we actually facilitate how we could perhaps put the hampers ready for them to take back and all the rest of it. So I think there's lots of ideas out there. We just need to glue them together. And that's what we need. We need we need to get clusters of people together and say, how could we do this? And that's what we want to try and do in our first workshop in the Stroud area, is to try and come up with those who are involved with it and say, what can we do with you? And we want it to be their ideas, and we're actually calling them co-creation workshops, because we want it to come from those people who are going to live it, not from us pushing it down. And there's your bottom up coming in.
Brilliant.
Okay, just to finish, if you had one tip for a grower, farmer, small-scale foodie, what would it be to get into food tourism and to build a successful business?
I could be very entrepreneurial and say, come and talk to me. One of the things we're working on actually is that we've actually, I've been developing a sort of a food heritage matrix. And part of that is to actually, within an area, is to map what's happening already. So you need to know what's happening on the ground. Now, who are the operators? What are they doing? You can do that by sort of web searches or local searches or whatever. And then the second thing I'll do then is to talk to those operators and say, where are you sourcing from? And could we be sourcing on that way? But I think if you can create a forum where they can do that on an equal footing, that they're all together virtually on a Zoom meeting, for example, and allow those connections to come. So I think you need to map your local area.
So it's about knowing what you've got.
Knowing what you've got.
And capital.
And then knowing what story you've got, and then knowing who could be the avenue for you to get it out there to the tourist, the visitor.
Claire, one tip for a budding.
Well, again, I was from a marketing perspective, because my background's very much about marketing. It's absolutely being authentic. Really take the time to sit down, really understand what your brand values are, what your unique selling point is. Really be clear in terms of who you're targeting. Spend the time getting the foundation right, because that's where it all goes wrong. It's all ethereal, there isn't a plan in place. And you've got to be really clear in terms of who you're targeting. And then, absolutely what you said, Richard, do a seagull's view of what's going on in your locality and look for collaborative opportunities, because there's huge opportunities out there. And don't be afraid to just pick up a phone and just talk. We've got more and more hotels now wanting to talk to food producers and look how they can push tourists out to go and see. So just be brave. Be brave. Be brave.
One of the biggest supporters of our project going forward, who's part of the steering group, is a hotel group. They're saying, we're ready to do this. We don't need the public body to do it. You set it up, we'll work with you. And they're prepared to pump prime it.
And it can go to scale at that point.
Yes, absolutely. It's exciting.
Richard, Claire, thank you very much. You've been listening to the FarmED podcast, number 9. I'm Jonty Brunye, manager here at FarmED. Hopefully that's inspired you to think a little bit more about the value of your food and how you can be more entrepreneurial with it. There's lots more to do, so come back and listen to some more. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much.
Thanks ever so much.
The production of this podcast was funded by the Farming the Future Coronavirus Emergency Response Fund. Thank you to the A-Team, Roddick, Samworth and 30 Percy Foundations for your support.